Did I hit the mark today? Did I show up in all of my moments, whether it was a big meeting or a one-on-one, did I show up in all of my moments being the leader I really want to be?
We have spoken in the past, and our previous conversation was pretty leadership heavy, which makes sense. You've got a pretty extensive background in leadership. So what I wanted to do with this conversation, and definitely welcome back, by the way, you are definitely one of the conversations on leadership I remember the most. And I believe the reason why is because it seems to come very naturally for you. So kind of how I wanted to start this conversation off was just asking about why is that? Like if we could dive into a little bit more of the backstory of where you developed that leadership ability and just really start from there.
There's a joke in my family about me being the captain of the crossing guard in elementary school. In my day, we had little teams of students that would actually go out in traffic and hold the stop signs to direct traffic to let other kids get across the crosswalks coming into school and going home at night. And it was an organization, and there was a hierarchy. And when I was introduced to it caught my interest, and I had an aspiration to climb the ranks there. And what I do recall, it wasn't an ego trip, but it was a opportunity that I sensed to serve. And I think for me, that's been the core of all opportunities that I've ever taken to lead an organization or build a team. It was that innate sense that there was a service that needed to be provided, and I had a passion for doing that, putting a team together to make it come to fruition. And for me, the early years, I grew up in San Antonio, Texas. And again, at that time, there were 5 different military bases, so we were heavily biased toward the military. And I pursued a military career. I joined ROTC in high school. That afforded me I got an academy appointment, and I had scholarships to all the service branches. I opted not to go to the academy, but instead take an Army scholarship and go to Texas A&M and join the Corps of Cadets. And again, that was a whole environment for leadership development, leadership training, and opportunities to serve. So it stuck with me, and it's carried me through most of my career.
Yeah. I love that you brought up service, because one of the conversations I've been having recently, which I'm tossing around a little bit because I'm trying to make sense of, is there such a thing as a servant leader? And naturally, I believe both of us would want to say yes, because I believe leadership is about service. But the question becomes, if you break it down, if you are serving someone, can you be leading them at the same time that you are serving them? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, the term servant leader has become a bit of a lightning rod over the years since it first evolved or first hit the scene. And on one hand, there are a lot of people like me who embrace that and say, I get it. Yes, that's exactly what kind of leader I would like to be. And, it's easy to think of it as flipping the pyramid of the organization chart and say, I want to be sure my people are being able to operate as their best selves. And if they can do that, then we will get the best outcome we can possibly get. So in that role or that mindset, the leader becomes a provider of resources, a provider of kind of a bulldozer effect, clearing roadblocks that may otherwise hamper the progress of the team. But they're doing it for the benefit of the team, not for any, self-aggrandizing scheme or ego trip. And there are others, though, and I've got some good friends and colleagues in leadership who we have these real healthy, spirited debates. There are others who hate that term. They think it connotes just the wrong idea, that it totally erodes authority. It sets up people for false expectations about what they're going to get from their leader. So I've come to appreciate and respect that idea. But I will tell you probably something that is more pertinent in the overall scheme of things is the idea of becoming a contextual leader. And that's a relatively new term, at least it has been to me as I've leaned into it and studied it. And what that means is good leaders have a keen sense of situational awareness. And situational awareness is something that we as military leaders learn at early age, that you have to be keen on paying attention to what's going on around you, because the enemy could be creating a flanking move and trying to get you from the side. So you have to create this situational awareness ability to gather data, observe what is going on, and then interpret that appropriately. And that's what I like about the idea of contextual leadership. And to tie it together, if I am predisposed to be a so-called servant leader, that's great. And contextually, if things are rocking along and going well, I can do those things. I can have my one-on-ones. I can try to develop my people. I can assess resources. I can do my decision making for the benefit of that greater good of the team. But contextually, if a huge problem comes up, I may have to, for the moment, get a lot more authoritarian. I may have to just say, hey guys, we don't have time to have a discussion about this. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the direction we're going to take. And that kind of shows up as the more authoritarian extreme. But it's undeniable that there are moments when a leader has to do that. They have to be the ones making the decision and making the call. And it might not be popular. It might not be friendly. It may be all the counter things that you would think of that might come with servant leadership.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say there is a leader, a contextual leader, has to be one with a heart for service, but be willing to step into the authority when necessary,
right?
And not let themselves be run over by continuing to serve and show up for everyone else except for the company and the actual priority at hand.
Right.
Yeah, I like that. So taking that a step further, is it really just about listening to the people on your team, kind of seeing where they're at? Because one of the things that I see happen often as well when you get a little bit too far down that situation is, instead of a leader, you become sort of like the company therapist, where, on certain days you spend most of your time consoling the people on your team, trying to get them out of this funk, where you're not moving the company forward toward a mission. You're really just sitting there trying to, help the people who are there with you.
Yeah. Often I think about, when I do get into discussions about leadership, there is a line from Forrest Gump that you can't deny. It's it's kind of like a box of chocolates. When you look across your team, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get on any given day. And part of that, as I've studied and thought about it and reflected on my own experience, part of that is because every one of us human beings that are going to join a team and go to work, we are existing in our own form of a Maslow's hierarchy. And for those who might not be familiar with Maslow, he proposed a kind of a pyramid of existence. And at the very bottom level, it's the quality of survival. Am I going to be warm, dry, and fed? Where's my next meal coming from? But then you go up the rung and you start looking at things like living in a community and being connected with a tribe, and then you go up a rung, and it's love and affection, and in the relationship you might have, you go on up a couple of notches, and you finally get to self-actualization, where you can operate as your best self because all these other things have been resolved, and now you can turn your attention to some really meaningful work. Well, as employers, we hire for the top of that pyramid. We want people that are ready to do the work. And people go to the job market and say, yeah, that's me. I can do that work. And so you make a hire, and next thing you know, the person comes up and something's happened at home, and they don't feel so good about their relationship or their tribe or their, even in some cases, their sense of safety and existence. So they're not going to focus on their work. They're going to have an off day, so to speak. And as a leader, there is a need to be some kind of aware of all of that going on. And again, reflecting on my group of peers, those that are a little more autocratic in the mindset, they're going to say, oh, that's hogwash. I hire somebody, they better damn well do the work. I need them here paying attention and going to work. But in the higher performing organizations, there is a kind of allowance for dealing with those situations where your employees aren't being their best selves. And the leader has to make individual assessments of all the people on their team and figure out a game plan. You have to have a development plan. It could be something like retraining or reassignment, but you still have to be proactive in dealing with that. And you can allow somebody to have an off day, but the question is, do those off days become a pattern? Is it 4 out of 5 days in a week? That's a problem. Yes, I totally agree with that. And you have to take a different approach to dealing with that, up to and including severance and termination.
Yeah. So let's talk about that scenario for a second, because it's a difficult one to deal with as a leader, or just even as a person. You've got somebody on your team who you recognize their potential. You can see what they're capable of, and maybe they're in a phase where they don't see it, right? They are having that 4 out of 5 days where it's poor me, everything's going wrong, the world's against me, etc. Where do you draw the line between, hey, I want to help you and I want to do what's right for you because we've got 5 years of track record of you being an amazing asset for the company, and on the other hand, hey, now it's been 2 months of poor me, poor me, poor me. At a certain point, do you need to say, hey, listen, man, I'm sorry, but now you are affecting the company. I feel bad for you on a personal level, but you got to leave. And where do you draw that line?
Yeah, it becomes a really sticky proposition, and I think there is no standard answer for any of that. I think it's all situational, and I go back a little bit to the contextual leadership idea. This is another example of where your approach and your demeanor has to match up with the challenge that you've got. Again, I think for most, it is a process to evaluate, and a lot of the initial discussions we get into have to do with fundamental performance, and there's a whole other discussion to be had about the idea of being able to set proper expectations, communicate adequately to get the message across. And to keep it simple, if I say my expectation is, hey, Jim, you need to produce 10 widgets for me every day. That's our thing. That's what we do. And to use your example, you do that for 4 or 5 months, and then all of a sudden there's a pattern. It goes from 10 to 9 to 8 to 7 to 6. And the trend line is going down, not maintaining. So there needs to be, that first step of, hey, can you talk to me about what's going on? There's a break in the pattern here. We had good performance and now it's not. So what's going on? And this is one area in particular where it is important for leaders to be sensitive to that degrading of performance, because it's not only about that individual, but it impacts the team. Everybody else on the team sees one person falling behind, and if they don't know what's going on, they just know that the team is not performing now because we've identified a weak link. And it's classic, I won't even call it leadership, but it's management theory to push the assignment over to somebody else because you still got to keep the numbers going. So now, there's Fred or Sally over there that Jim's not doing his 10 widgets, and I need them to pick up and try to do 2 or 3 extra in a day. And they're going to do that for a minute, but they're not going to do that for long term, especially if they're one of your best performers. If their widgets are top of the line, perfect, no flaw, very comprehensive and complete delivery, they're not going to suffer that for long, and they're the ones that are going to go start looking for another job because you are not dealing with the problem.
Yeah. So now let me ask you a different scenario. Let's say we've got someone who is exceptionally skilled and performs really well at their task. All right. So their job is making widgets. They do a great job of making widgets. Undeniably, they are skilled. They do a great job of making widgets. As a leader, you have a desire for them to, maybe you see a little bit more potential. They could either manage the widget making department, right? But they are perfectly content just being a widget maker, doing their 9 to 5 and going home. What do you do in that scenario, right? Because you want to be able to continue to grow the people on your team. You want to be able to grow the company. But if you've got a company full of people who are just content doing their thing, and there's no qualms, right? They're really good at it. So you can't fire them for, non-performing or whatever it is, but they just don't want to go any further. How do you grow that team?
Well, and that's a phenomenal question, and it's prevalent in a lot of places at a lot of levels and in a lot of different job requirements. I think it starts with the leader having some form of relationship with the individual. And when I say relationship, I don't mean, emotional or any other level, but I mean having an awareness of what is in their head, what is their expectation. And when you lean in and you talk to your people about their plans, visions, hopes, and dreams, you can get a sense of whether or not promoting them up is going to destroy what you've got going on. Because undeniably, there are a lot of people that operate that way. I'll tell you a quick story. I was once asked to come in and lead a first-time manager program for a large company who had a practice of promoting up individual contributors, and this happened to be engineering. So I had this room full, about 60 of them actually, engineers that had good careers being an engineer, but they had been asked to step up and become a team leader or a section head. And so they were now in this class to learn how to be a manager for the first time. We went through about the first hour and a half of the program, took a break, and there was this line that formed at my podium. And I took the first guy and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "If this is what we're going to do, I don't want to do it. I want to go back to being an engineer." And I would kind of awkwardly, because I'm from the outside, right? And I'm kind of going, "Oops," and I'm thinking a whole number of things. And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, would you mind stepping over to the side here? Let me see what everybody else has to say, and then I'll get back to you." So he did. But sure enough, everybody in line had overheard his thing, and they all said, "That's what we're here for, too." And I had to call my HR contact that was orchestrating all of this, and I said, "What do you want to do about this?" And she said, "Well, encourage them to hang with it. We, a couple of chapters over in the book, they'll start to get it and they'll start to see it, and it'll be okay." And I said, "All right, we'll do that." And it was, but it was that initial reaction of that, I love what I'm doing. I love being an engineer getting to do my contribution to projects. And when you tell me all I'm going to have to do with being a manager, which is a lot of what we've just been talking about, really connecting with people, getting to know them, evaluating, making choices about development and sometimes discipline, that's quite a bit different from just being a good engineer. And so back to your question, I think it's important that people do, as leaders, you've got to have that connection. You've got to have those early discussions about expectations and obligations between each other, and then set the standard for what performance needs to look like, and then allow people to go do their thing and operate. And as soon as it starts missing the mark, you have to have that immediate follow-up discussion and create that kind of accountability to the standard.
Yeah. What I'm hearing you say, there's a really big proponent of listening to the people on your team, and not only what they say, but how they're feeling, maybe things that are not verbally communicated, but just if they have some level of fear or hesitation around that, to meet with them and understand that. And instead of saying, hey, I'm the leader and I said, this is what we're going to do and you're going to do it like it or not, but really having the conversation to understand why they feel a certain way and kind of meet with them and maybe walk them through that a little bit, rather than saying, because I said so, now get to work. Really taking a little bit more of a gentler approach to kind of lead them through it and massage that into action.
Well, and depending on the nature and size of your business that you're leading, there may be plenty of opportunity to share with the individual that if they will take on a certain task for a season, it's going to help them grow in the long term. It's maybe a subject area or a technical area that they don't know anything about, and it's still pertinent to what your team is producing, but and you need to get it done. You're the leader, you need to get it done, and everybody else is filled up, so you've got to have this person do that work. You often can talk to them about the value of leaning in and learning something new and different, so that it can add to their value, their long-term value and opportunity with the business. It is, back to your original question, and I do a lot of work with small and mid-sized businesses that are independent and entrepreneurially led, and a lot of it has to do with technical services like plumbing, heating, air conditioning. And your question about the person that just wants to do their work, that is prevalent in those service-based businesses. The technician that's going to drive the truck and go out to the job site, they kind of just, that's all they want to do. They don't want to have a lot of noise and chatter and other obligations. They just want to go get the work done. But you will inevitably find somebody on your team that is an amazing technician. Everybody loves working with them. If you're in a home services type business, your customers love, Jim the tech, I've got a problem, can you send Jim, and well, you can't send Jim everywhere, but it's that kind of scenario. But talking with those folks, your immediate opportunity as the owner of that business is to say, hey, Jim, I need you to step up for us. Would you consider being a team leader? And I really appreciate the way you do your work, the way you go about it, your mindset, how you treat people, how you treat customers. I need you to start trying to share that with other people, show other people how you do that, how you got there. And many times those individuals will think about it and they'll agree. They'll realize that, hey, that's kind of cool. I can really help make the world a better place if I'll just do that. But it's all a matter of the owner, founder, leader framing it up in the right way to talk to the person in a way that makes sense to them and really can become a value add in their own mind.
Yeah. I want to take a step to this, to the back or to the side, whichever direction we want to go in. But when you were talking about that, what it made me think of is a lot of scenarios where I've seen someone who starts a company, right? They're the founder of the company. In a lot of cases, they will be the initial lead technician. All right. So they're the person out in the field doing the work. They own the company, but they started this. They know the role. Then they start to add one or two people. And what inevitably winds up happening is the founder is now in a position where they're asking someone to be a leader, right? So they have a technician on their team. They're saying, hey, I'd like you to go out and do this as a leader. And where the problem that I see comes in is that founder has no actual leadership experience. So now they're in this weird scenario where they're asking a team member to become a leader. First of all, this team member does not see the founder doing leadership activity because it's not a thing that they are skilled or trained in. And then they're also asking them to say, hey, can you be a leader? I don't even know how to tell you to do it. I just know I need you to go lead. And on the organizational chart, in theory, you're below me, but I'm actually expecting you to do even more than I can do. And I can't train you to do that because no one ever trained me, right? How often do you see that scenario play out?
Probably 9 times out of 10. That's kind of the reality of it. Yeah, and that is the rub with entrepreneurially founded business. That founder owner may have a great idea. They may have an amazing skill set that is worthy and does in fact become a profitable business. But it is that idea of how do you scale that? You've hit a mark somewhere in the world and it's working. Can you scale that and grow that into something else? And you're absolutely right. The majority of individuals that have done that, they don't have leadership development. They weren't on the crossing guard when they were in 5th grade. They had to. They're kind of learning on the fly how to build an organization and build a team around them. And it's not an easy task. And I'll tell you the one thing that usually derails all of that more significantly than anything else is simply the founder's ego.
Yeah.
They don't want to admit they've got a problem. They don't want to admit there's an issue. They're kind of going to dictate. And more often than not, those individuals have a kind of a command and control way about them. It's the old phrase is my way or the highway kind of thinking. And that gets communicated and permeated through the organization. Thankfully, I guess I'd say thankfully, in the trades, that somehow seems to work because that's the predominant culture that you'll find on job sites. And on one hand, there's some value in that. When you're constructing something, as for instance, or you're operating a big piece of machinery in a bigger factory type setting, there's not a lot of room for creativity and independence. You have to follow the procedures. You have to go through the steps. You have to start up the machine in a sequence of events. You can't make that up. You can't alter it. So it lends itself to the command and control sort of autocratic, do it this way and no other way. And a lot of people go to work in that environment. They get used to it and they understand it. But it comes back to the question of if your business is needing to scale, you want to scale the business to grow it, you're going to have to multiply. You're going to have more people on the team. You're going to need more techs. You're going to have to organize those techs into probably small teams or business segment type units. And you need somebody overseeing that. So you need a team leader or a manager to help you with that. And, not to minimize the challenge, but to the core of your question, that owner or founder that knows in their heart they don't have that background in really leading and demonstrating leadership, that's where it makes sense to find yourself an advisor or a coach to come in and work with you and help you get over that hump, help you learn a few things, or at least have a discussion about what could be different and what else you might need to think about doing to open that next chapter in the growth of your business.
Right. Which I think makes a tremendous amount of sense. And I mean, even if you look around and not to knock plumbers by any means, but just to use them as an example, how many times do you see in your local area dozens and dozens of 1 to 2 truck operations where they, scale big enough to have a little bit of a company. They hired another tech, they got another van on the road, but that's as far as they get because they can't get past that point because They don't have that leadership instilled. And again, not a knock on them, but I think it's more of a comment to the founder operator not necessarily also having the skill set. And again, not a knock. It's a different skill set to grow and scale a company to a certain point, that just because you founded the company and have a great idea and have a great competitive advantage does not also mean you have the skill set to now grow that into a larger operation. Right. So I think that's tremendous encouragement to someone who is in that position. Listen, unless you want to be stuck at 1 to 2 trucks, a successful but still minimal operation where now you're stuck to the business every day, you need to go out and get a little bit of coaching, right? You need to get that skill set to grow, and or look at, hey, how do I get someone in here to be a CEO where I can take a step back and go do the things that I'm really skilled at and let them execute, right?
That's
so
right.
With that in mind, let me ask you another question. If I go now and let's say I'm the founder of Jim's Plumbing Company, I built this from the ground up. It was just me, started out, hired a technician, and now I make the decision to go hire a CEO. How do I release control to a CEO, right? Because that's the next biggest hurdle that we see is you go hire a CEO and then you put handcuffs on him and say, all right, I want you to run the company because you're the CEO, but I'm still going to tell you everything to do. How do I make that leap?
Well, the best candidate to take that job is going to be proactively asking you that question. Are you really going to release control and let me run this for you? Here's what I know how to do. Here's my demonstrated proof of my history making businesses like this run well and grow. Are you really going to let me do this? And it's almost, well, I'll say it this way. The best scenarios where that has happened, that's the dynamic. That CEO is already demonstrating leadership, even with the owner saying, here's what I'm going to need to fulfill your expectation of what you want me to do for you. So first time you step your toe into my sandbox, we're going to have a problem.
Yeah. And I think that takes a certain amount of boldness, right?
Well, it does. It does. And it is on the owner founder to really ask themselves the question, am I really ready to do that? Am I really ready to give up so that we can grow? Yeah. And I know a situation, there were 3 individuals that had formed a partnership, and they were in the restaurant business out in California. And each one of them had their own very unique skill set that added to the greater good of the whole. One guy was a customer service wizard. One guy was actually a expert chef. And the third guy was more of a general operations specialist. And they built this company up. They had, I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was double-digit locations in this chain they wanted to build. But then it all of a sudden started feeling out of control. They didn't have collectively among themselves, they knew they were missing something. So they agreed they needed to go hire a CEO, and they all unilaterally pledged that I'm okay with that. I'm going to give up my part of something to create this CEO role. And they did recruit a guy, found a guy, and it became a wonderful relationship. The guy knew what he was doing, and they grew the business to 100 locations. And, it was and they sold it off for about $100 million eventually. But it was a great case of the founders. And that was a very unique case because it wasn't just one founder making that choice, but it was three founders making that choice to give up control. And, and sometimes this doesn't always work, but if you put it on paper and think about it a minute, if I'm the owner of something that's worth $1, that's nice, that's my dollar. But if I'm the owner of something that's $100 million, that's quite a bit different. And what role do I really have to be performing as long as we're achieving the profitability goals and growth goals that we want? What else does that really mean?
Yeah. I think one of the best questions you could possibly ask in that scenario is an alignment of the priorities. So if you're talking about, hey, I'm the founder and I hired a CEO, if both of our priorities are growing and protecting the business, problem solved. Like, it becomes the decisions that are made are about what is in the best interest of the business.
Absolutely.
So long as you remove your ego from the conversation, problem solved. I know, hey, that decision you make, even if I disagree with it, now I'll hold you in check, right? If it's something that's way against the company code of conduct here, yeah, we're going to talk about it. But I'm not going to take it personally because I know at the end of the day, your priority is growing the business. So it's not a personal attack against me, right? It's about, hey, even if I have a certain way I was going to do things, but if it was just going to be me, I wouldn't have hired you, right? So it's removing that ego and pride from the thing and really trusting each other to say, hey, company first. And I think if you guys are on that same page, solves a lot of issues.
Totally.
Yeah. How important do you consider after action reviews? And how frequent do you do them?
Well, after action a review is very helpful in a lot of ways, and I am a big advocate of it. And yes, it goes all the way back to my military experience. That's what we did when there was a campaign or an initiative of any kind. There was always an after action, and the spirit of the after action wasn't to put anybody on the chopping block, but it was to learn. It was to say, what did we do well? What did we miss? What did we do poorly? And what are we going to do about correcting that going forward? And that is how you get your incremental growth as a business. And you can even do an after action. Let's go back to our plumbing company example. You can not necessarily have to have a giant project that is an obvious chunk of work that you're going to execute over a certain period of time, and then it ends and you do an after action. You can have the equivalent of an after action report just in a monthly review of the business. If you set some service standards and KPIs for what you want your techs to be able to do, you can accumulate all that. You can have the team huddle, and say, all right, let's review the numbers. And again, I stress the idea when you're doing after action and review like that, it should never be about putting somebody on the chopping block and creating a public execution or humiliation of somebody for missing the mark, but rather it just should be full day of light accountability for what's going on in the business. And if you've got individuals on the team that are lagging behind, they're going to get the message. They're going to realize that, wow, compared to everybody else, I'm not hitting my marks. And they're either going to self-select and move on, or middle case, they're going to come to you and say, it's obvious I need some help. I'm missing something here, help me with this. Or they're going to play a little bit of a denial game, and you as a leader, then once you do your review, you're still going to have to go to them one-on-one and say, and this is the private part, you go to them independently and say, okay, you saw the numbers, you saw everybody's where we are, and you're at the bottom of the list, we need to talk about what that means and what we can do about it. And if it were me, I would say, I don't want you to fail. I don't want anybody on my team failing. I want you to be up there in the mix with everybody else. You don't have to be at the top of the list, but we do agree we need to see, these metrics improve. What are you willing to do? And here's what I can do for you. And you need to have those follow-up discussions.
Yeah. And I think doing them frequently and actually taking the time to do them is one of the most overlooked things people do, right? Because we get busy with the next thing, right? So we just passed Christmas season 2024. A lot of people in a lot of different businesses either, hey, maybe you wanted to take time off for your family during that, and for whatever reason, you didn't schedule it properly, and you were stressed out with how the holiday worked out. Now you jump into January. Did you intentionally set your schedule for December 2025 so that same thing doesn't happen again? Or did you just get so busy with, now it's January, let's start up this other project, and it's going to be December 2025, and you're going to have a repeat of last year, right? So I think encouragement for anyone listening to this right now is take the time to do that at minimum weekly, to think about, hey man, what happened in this past week? What was the most frustrating thing? What do I want to avoid not bring into next week, right? To look at what are the things that happened in this week of business that went well or didn't go well. How can I improve on those? And it could be, a thought while you're going for a walk. It could be part of your morning journal, right? But take the time to do that, because I'll vouch for it, and I'm sure you would as well, the importance of doing that and actually implementing it in your business, growing that 1% better every day. I think a lot of people overlook that, right? We want these big wins, these low-hanging fruit to be able to 10x my company this year, and we fail to do the small things excellently. I want to encourage people to make that a priority.
Yeah, I agree totally. The bottom line is that effective leadership is just another kind of human behavior. So if you're in a leadership role, if you're that owner founder, or you're an officer in a company of some sort, or a designated manager title, you've got to ask yourself the question, what kind of leader do I want to be, and how do I want to show up every day? And to your point, when you lay out that framework, you have to periodically assess it. You have to give yourself a grade. Did I hit the mark today? Did I show up in all of my moments, whether it was a big meeting or a one-on-one? Did I show up in all of my moments being the leader I really want to be? And if not, that's an after action report. That's an after action analysis. And you say, all right, tomorrow I'm going to have these 3 opportunities. I'm going to do this part of my leadership differently in those 3 opportunities I've got tomorrow. And it becomes a progressive building of success. It's not too different from a person that's really good at wanting to go to the gym. What are you doing when you go work out? You're building some health habits that serve your greater good. And the same thing is true in leadership development. It's about changing some habits that were not necessarily healthy or proper behaviors, and identifying the good behavior, the good habit that you now want to implement. And I've done executive coaching long enough now. I've got plenty of case studies of people who, once they identify the thing they need to change and they start practicing it on a regular basis, eventually there's a kind of leadership muscle that develops its own memory for what you're doing that fits the bill. So you can develop a leadership muscle memory for the principles and actions that you want to represent as that leader you want to be.
Yeah, I love that. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of practicing daily, right? And understanding, hey, you're not supposed to be an expert at it. You're supposed to continue to level up every freaking day. You're never going to be a 10, right? You want to be a 9.9 because there's always a little bit further to go.
That's right.
I think that's an important mentality to have.
Well, and even
Yeah.
about the time you hit a 9 or 9.9, maybe some new opportunity is going to unfold. Maybe your business gets a chance to expand into a new market or something like that. And we're kind of back to the contextual leadership. The new parameters of the new situation could demand other things from you, and it could be elements of your own leadership you haven't had to exercise yet. And here you go. Now you're on a new journey to develop an extra skill set or put an extra tool in your leadership tool bag.
Yeah. How important do you think it is to have fun in that process? When you say that to me, that just the concept of it, and even though it wasn't necessarily about me there, I got excited thinking, hey, there's a new skill I can learn, and how can I go take this new skill I'm going to learn and apply it? And that jazzed me up. So I'm curious your thoughts on how important is it to really have fun in that process?
Well, I think it's very important. And again, I'll tell you a quick sidebar story. Back in my banking days, we were old school bankers. I mean, we were still wearing, navy suits and burgundy ties and white shirts. And we were a very successful organization, but one year we had done our budget and planning, and we had the big all hands meeting to talk about the plans for the new year. And our CFO stood up there, and when you think CFO, this was the classic guy. I mean, he hardly ever smiled, and but he was a wizard, a brilliant man. But he stood up there and he went through this bullet list on a slideshow. He was clicking off goals and objectives, and he was going click yes, click, and it was all business oriented. And then finally he clicked one that said have fun. And everybody kind of went, okay, this is new and different. What do you mean? And he actually made quite a pivot in his own demeanor. And he said, I know I've got a reputation of being pretty stoic. And he said, quite honestly, I'm tired of that. I want to have some fun doing this. We've got a great team. We're doing some great things. I want to allow it to be fun. And he meant it. And you could tell he meant it. And there was kind of this whole little bit of shift in the dynamic. And sure enough, we did. Over the next 3 to 5 years, we acquired a couple of other banks and did a whole bunch of other stuff and kept our numbers growing. And it was fun. There was a kind of pride on being on a good team. If your team can go 15-1 in the season, there's kind of a pride that comes with that. And so. It's a self-fueling flywheel if you can get it going, and that's where leadership kicks in.
Yeah. You can't put enough importance on how much fun it is to win. I think we miss that a lot.
Right.
It's fun to win. Winning is fun. And I think a lot of people, we've got this participation trophy attitude we've developed. It doesn't work like that. Winning is kind of the goal, and if you can encourage your people to have fun in the process and win, and then start compounding those two, I think that's when the explosive growth really starts.
Yeah, I agree. And I often talk to my clients, and most of my, again, 99.9 of my clients, they're already good performing leaders, but they are looking for that next edge, that next level up. And inevitably we'll talk about, I'll ask them the question, how do you celebrate wins? And they kind of go, we don't, not really, to be honest. And we have a discussion about what that could mean and what that could look like, because it is important to celebrate, and it does border on the notion of potentially having some fun. Just find that little thing you can do either for yourself or for your team, because a lot of times high-performing individuals, they hit a goal, they complete a project, and they go, okay, that's what I was supposed to do. What's next?
Right.
And that doesn't survive in the marathon environment. You can do that for a sprint, but business is a marathon, and having no sense of celebration or fun in the win, you've got to do that.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to thank you again because this conversation was exceptional. And I know that this is the second time we've spoken about a topic. And look, leadership is a topic that I think you can only talk about so much, right? There's only so many different ways you could talk about what does leadership mean? How do you lead a company, right? But talking to you, I feel like we can continue to have this conversation for the next 3 hours straight and get even deeper. And I want to give you some honor for that because it's very clear you are someone who continues to sharpen their sword and really has fun in the process. So thank you for doing that, for continuing to do the work, and for coming back to help people do it better as well. Because that's a whole different thing, man. And it is really appreciated that there are people like you who are going to go out there and continue to help other people level up. I'm grateful for you, man. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. Glad and happy to serve.
Thank you. How can people best support you?
The best way to do is hop over to my website at Doug Thorpe. That's THORPE.com. Check out all the offerings I've got there. I am, with the new year, I do have a special package offering. I call it Vision 25. So you can learn about it on the same website, DougThorpe.com/Vision25. Just all mashed together there, Vision 25.
Perfect. And that's the number 25?
25, number 25.
Okay, perfect. All right, yeah, we'll make sure to add that in the show notes. And man, again, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jim.